I think going way back in time was what I'd call the toilet paper version, which was a roll of cash register paper, and it would just roll it forward and backwards like a player piano, and there were hundreds of hand-painted pictures and text on each on this roll of cash register paper, and the computer would roll it to the one it wanted, stop, and then a light would light up behind, and there was this dark smoke glass, so you couldn't see it until the light lit up. And
so it was mechanical and computer.
Yeah, mechanical and computer.
How long before? How long before you came to us? Was that going months before or a year before?
It's probably more than 2 years before.
Wow.
And then after that, we took it to the toy companies, and they all loved it, and they had no idea how they would print that cash register paper. They had none. They said, we have no idea how we could do this, how we can manufacture it. And then, so I thought, well, we came up with what I call the Rolodex. And this thing was huge, this big, giant Rolodex with double cards. And it would go flipping through these hundreds of cards on each reel, and then stop, and then either this light or that light would light up, same thing with the smoke glass, and you would make your decision.
Determined, weren't you?
Well, I thought it was fun. Then we came up with the first Laserdisc version, which was still pictures. We evolved because for any given scene, we might have 5 or 6 stills, and we had for the first time live voice. And then that led to Dragon's Lair for the coin-op, and we're saying, okay, well, if we're going to do this for coin-op, because we were also developing coin-operated games, and we said, well, if we're going to take this thing, at that time it was called Secrets of the Lost Woods, and that became Dragon's Lair. And Dragon's Lair was just a working name, and you know how that goes. It stuck. If you recall, we had demonstrations and things working when you guys came out to show it to you, and I think the biggest point was when we saw The Secret of NIMH, and I just went, wow, this is an incredible movie film, because I forgot that it was an animated film.
So you pitched the Rolodex.
And called you.
I still remember the day you and Jim Pierce came to the studio, and when you guys left, we all looked at each other going, what are they talking about? I mean, it was just a different world, and all the way through it, I mean, probably, if you remember, you came to us, I think, in October of '82. Mm-hmm. And we jumped on it right away, and Don started thinking about designs and stuff like that. And then you sent over your first continuity of a sequence, and then he started asking questions like, "Wait a minute, we're going to go to there's a moment any time during this little sequence of this particular room where he might die. We have to come up with ways of branching the
nomenclature, though, and we would say this is a threat moment, this is a resolve moment. This is a new threat moment, this is a resolve moment. So we kept saying threat, resolve, threat, resolve. The one that you got me, because I was really out to lunch, was you said, even after you finish the animation, we're going to have to program it. And I thought, a program? Yeah, I know what a program is. You read it when you go to the theater. But I didn't know what programming meant, and I knew that there was somewhere down in San Diego there was something weird going on. That's all I knew.
Well, it started with Rick's team, but then
I think there was an awful lot of controversy between our companies. It started out real good, and then I think it got pretty contentious. I think a lot of it had to do with the pressure too. We had the scripts, we had the artists that were doing all these concepts and so forth. And for the most part, our team had no clue about the art of animation.
True. And
so they were coming up with things that may or may not have been animatable at all from your all standpoint.
Yeah, it was sort of like we were lobbing stones at each other over a fence because we didn't know. I didn't understand your world at all, and then there was some reticence on what we were doing up there. So each was doing its own thing, what we were familiar with. We with animation, and they with the electronics. But also, Rick has a good sense of story and character, and so that's what I think was sustaining what was going on in your company. And then we were trying to grab the ball and run with it, but not knowing exactly what they were going to do with it when we reached the goalpost. Anyway, I think Dragon's Lair, the first one, would have been even better than it was, I think, if we understood each other's kingdoms a little bit better. But it was a moment of getting acquainted and we knowing what their job was and vice versa. But I believe just the story elements, that we hooked into almost immediately. And what we were trying to tell was a story of a knight who was a ne'er-do-well, who was sort of klutzy and didn't know quite what he was doing and wasn't very adept, trying to save a princess that was equally not adept. And so
I think that it is absolutely getting acquainted, because we were designing from a gameplay standpoint,
right.
and you were having to work from how do I bring it to life from an animation standpoint. And the problem was that sometimes what we were ending up with wasn't playable as a game. It was beautiful as a piece of film, but that they would get it back and go, he changed it. How are we gonna play with this?
The way my brain has worked in the past is that I would see something and it would come on a concept. Maybe it's just in script form or written right there, and I'd say, oh, okay. So immediately I see the visions of it and what could be. So then, in so doing, I'm not gonna let those words stop me, because we have to push further. We have to push it to a place where we get something that's really, really excellent. Which again, what you're doing is building on something that's been put underneath you. Mm-hmm. Well, those who put that there are going to feel like, oh, you didn't like what I did, And it isn't that at all. But I think any creative or collaborative process that's creative is that you are building on an idea all the time. This is always happening. And if you let your ego get a little bit sensitive to that, then it kind of cripples you. You should know the ideas are going to come. They come from out there somewhere. And when they come to you, it doesn't matter who births it. It's just you want to keep going for even more if you can get it even better. And I think that's what we were going through in the beginning, was how to make the best thing game-wise and picture-wise on the screen so that the viewer could enjoy it.
Well, the other problem is we were in uncharted waters.
Completely,
So there, it was a ship without a helm sometimes, because you had never been there and we had never been there, and trying.
That was fun, though.
Trying to.
You don't know where you are.
And I think we survived it, and Dragon's Lair went on to become that unimaginable success because of the fact that we really were in uncharted waters, and I think our audience, which is the kids out there, they accepted it for what it was.
Yeah, I think that's what
they didn't have any milestone to compare it to. I want to start that out, because we had a moviola, this little thing. It was this big. That was how that's the only way we ever saw this film, was on a moviola. The thing was about this big. Terrible, but it allowed us to see the film. And then the best we got was when we did the transfer onto a digital.
It was actually a video.
Or video format.
Yeah.
Even on 1-inch C back then, the quality was what today's television is.
It was good quality. It was better than TV. TV couldn't actually reproduce the.
But for me, I never really got to see a big screen of it.
Yeah.
And so today, when we saw it on HD, it's like, for me, it was like seeing it for the first time. It was just brilliant.
It's just
colors.
So clear.
Yeah.
Dust free.
How about you?
And of course the sound.
I'm very, very, very pleased with the HD, because to me that's what I saw all the way along we were making it. Even with the moviola, so we saw it on a big screen. We projected in a projector. You see it on the big screen and you look at it and you see all the colors, all of the definitions, all of the lights and everything. It's all working together. So I'm used to seeing that, and so all the other formats we put this game to, I just sort of.
Because it was a lot less than what.
I would not look at them. I would not look at them. See, I can look at this now, and I can say, oh yeah, okay, that's closer.
Well, you're a motion picture artist.
And really, all that was got done was a concept, not even a game design, just a one-page concept of what it was going to be. And Don did a poster, a pencil for a poster of Barnacle Bill and the Sea Beast. And I think Don Moore or Ron Diaz, one of the background artists, painted it into a poster about this big. And people have seen that. People, and they've asked about it.
Part of what happens too is over the years, I think I've noticed that we pick an interesting title, then try and fit a story into it. I mean, All Dogs Go to Heaven was one of those titles. And you do it hoping that, you know, it has an attraction from just the concept or from the title of the thing. Sea Beast was one of those that just sort of rings when you hear it, the Sea Beast, you know, what is it? And some titles don't have that at all. And I think anything, we would have been glad to do anything where you tell a story, because it's the storytelling that's fun, whether it's a game or whether it's a movie. Movies are a lot of fun because they keep you employed for a long time, and you have this rising action and a climax and the falling off action, and you have really interesting characters. With a game, had it gotten to the place where you could have an interactive movie, if it had progressed to that, I would have been really...
That would have been a real challenge.
Because you know what, being passive, just sitting watching a movie and getting an opinion is all you really have. I don't think that's quite as interesting as participating in the movie somehow. Even if you're scared to death and you scream, at least you participated. But if you just sit and watch, it's not quite the thrill.
Let me share a little more of the backstory too, because when we did Secret of NIMH, our composer Jerry Goldsmith took the film, or brought the film to Steven Spielberg's attention. And we had a meeting with Steven right after the completion of the showing of that. It was like August, early September of '82. And he looked at it and he says, gosh, I thought this died with Walt Disney. You know, the style and the lushness of it and the effects, and it was especially complimentary on the dub, which was much fuller and richer than most animated movies done before. And he said, we need to do something together. Well, it took 2 years before he came back to us. And he came back, it's just like Rick walked in the middle of a union strike. Spielberg walks in when the game industry fell apart. Here we had a lineup of, I think Don came up in a little group of story people we had in there. Will Finn and Lorna was involved, John Pomeroy. Came up with a list of 30 games. 10 children games that were educational, and teaching how to do addition and subtraction and multiplication. They were little stories, and the computer would bring up random things like 1 + 3 =, and you had to give the right answer for the story to continue, and it would be animated. And then we had 10 moral games for children that taught, you know, morals, like the story of Cinderella, but we called it, I think, Cinder Mouse.
Cinder Mouse, right.
And then there were 10 action games for teenagers. And so they had a poster for every one of those, and one of those was Barnacle Bill and the Sea Beast. We trotted those off to, we had done 2 animatics, or was it just one?
I think it's just one.
We did an 8-minute animatic of something called Dottie Do the Sum. It was a character named Dottie, D-O-T-T-I-E. And we did an animated 8-minute piece, and IBM took it out and did a $100,000 survey with it, and parents were thrilled with the idea. But they said, well, there's just not enough players in the home for Laserdisc.
Hardware.
And we said, we're making razor blades. Give the players away. This is something that is going to lead into other and new technology. We didn't get any comers. So just at the time that failed, up stood Spielberg saying, I found something. It's called An American Tale.
I'd love to do that Barnacle Bill.
Yeah, it would. I think maybe the wouldn't necessarily be an arcade game, although you could test it in arcades to find out if it would work. But with the ability to do interactive DVD now, I mean, it seems to me that you've got a lot more homes that are equipped to play such a game. I mean, I thought it was interesting that Digital Leisure came up with a way to play Dragon's Lair using your remote controller on your DVD player. I mean, you know, with forward, back, you know, select for the button, and kids can play it with one hand, or parents.
Yeah, it's amazing because they weren't designed to be used for that way. No one really thought of that. But
and even those 30 games that we had designed for to work with IBM for, they were educational, or they were just basically action adventure activity games for teenagers, and then but especially the ones that were 3 to 5 or 6-year-olds learning math, learning all the forms of math, you know, adding, subtracting, multiplication, you know, where they have to do some memorization of your timetables and your numbers. Uh, Everybody saw it as being very helpful, and I don't think it's any different today. I think that's something that done probably even in a CG format, which the kids are used to now. That was Rick's testing. I think things were animated. Some things actually were all the way to color. Some weren't. I know Digital Leisure took the gargoyle sequence. We were able to find all of the pencil tests and were able to send those up to Digital Leisure, and they actually colored them and used the backgrounds and produced a version of it that the fans could all see. But those sequences were taken out because Rick's group, when they did the pay testing, bringing game enthusiasts in and paying them an hourly salary to play the game and tell them what works and what doesn't work, those sequences were hard to understand and
hard to play. They
downright boring. That sequence doesn't work, doesn't interest me, and it's difficult to get through. So,
That's an easy thing, though. That's a really easy thing to go through, because in movies all the time, a movie starts out really, really good and then it sags. And you say the material's bad, cut it out, so then you have to hook it together again. And movies are always, they're sagging. And the sag moment is the moment that you're not doing anything very interesting. In games, you have the same thing.
And that was a highly contested issue at the time, and it got left out in terms of the gameplay because we just found it was too hard for an opening gambit into the game. It was too difficult. Too many people were getting frustrated and they walk away from the machine, wouldn't put any more quarters in. So we basically just had to let it go. We didn't want to, but we found that for the average Joe Blow just starting, that's their first impression, and if they can't be successful at it, they're not going to keep putting money into the machine. So
I think when those one-eyed tentacles came out of the water, it was really handsome to look at. At the same time, it was a shock, and they wouldn't even be thinking about what move they had to make.
And they couldn't figure it out.
So they couldn't figure it out. So and if they did figure it out, it actually jumped over the final action of that. Him breaking through and falling in the water.
A coin operator has always been a true test of the quality of a game, because you're really asking a kid to reach into his pocket and pull out more money, and the game better be really good for him to reach into his pocket and pull out more money.
We did the first test of Dragon's Lair as far as exposing it to the audience was at the March 1983 game show in Chicago, and it was such a huge hit. I think that gave everybody the impetus to keep going and get going on the next thing.
That reminds me of that story when Jim was at the show, and at the end of the show, I asked Jim, I said, well, how did it go? And he had that
Cheshire Cat
grin on his face, and I'm going, oh God. And he goes, we booked $10 million in sales.
That's amazing. Only 3 sequences. It only had 3 playable sequences.
And that was 3 days. That was a 3-day show. And to book that kind of orders in 3 days, wow.
Let's see, my favorite scene in Dragon's Lair, let me think. It might be that sort of a magic room he goes in and it says, eat me and drink me, and I just thought it was just, the concept was funny. Mm-hmm. It was a very, very short scene, but been a lot of requests from people that actually wanted to buy the cells and the background from that sequence, and it was funny. We never could find the background, so it went missing at some point in our careers.
For me, it was definitely the final scene.
Oh, me too.
Sequence 13.
Yes.
Yeah.
To me, that made the game. That was the payoff.
The dragon.
No, I really think there was a real payoff there.
Probably because of all those Playboy magazines that Don was
Yeah,
using
that
to
was
find
part
the
of the
model.
payoff. Yeah,
Why?
Absolutely.
I never looked at a Playboy magazine.
I found it interesting that all the kids knew about that, but there was never a peep in the press.
Yeah.
It's kind of amazing that no one mentioned.
Maybe those
that.
kids recognized the poses. We've had all the artwork for almost everything we've done. The Dragon's Lair, our first film in Don's Garage, Banjo the Woodpile Cat, and pieces of all the features, and especially the last 3 were passed on to us by the owners of the product. And last year, after spending close to $500,000 over 20 years to store the stuff, we elected to donate it to one of the colleges that offer animation. So the entire archive, which would fill a 2,000, I guess you'd have to multiply it into a cube. It was very tall shelves, industrial shelves, that every shelf was filled with our archive. And that is all with the Savannah College of Art and Design and at the disposal of those art students. We've had a completed script for over 3 years now, and we've had some very positive meetings with the studios. Right now, and the studios agree it shouldn't be done as a CG movie, it should be done in traditional animation like the original game. But traditional animation right now is in sort of limbo, and somebody, it's going to take a risk taker that's willing to put up the money to make one of these movies. And right now, the rumors and the news that I've been reading is that Disney is restarting their 2D division, having come to the assumption that they possibly shut it down incorrectly. They should have.
Well, there's
kept
one vote. That's one vote for.
Yeah, and I think that if they can prove that it's profitable, there'll be other studios that jump in, because right now there's a logjam of CG projects out there, and the families can't afford to go to every one of them. I think there were 13 being released between July and September. That's almost one a week.
So we're on CG overload then.
We're in CG overload right now, so we'll see who falls out of the system. But Dragon's Lair, Don has boarded some of it already. It's a funny script. There's a comic book out. Arcana is not distributing, but they're publishing for MV Creations. They've just finished a composite of the first 3 issues that were done a couple of years ago, and Don had done the new cover for it. And I've approved book issue 4 and 5. Those are in the pipeline, and 6. I'm waiting for the first pencils on that, but it looks really good.
And they've introduced a new dragon in the movie. It is the coolest dragon.
I
don't think I've ever seen a dragon like that.
The movie's actually a prequel. It's a prequel. You're going to follow Dirk from his birth until he becomes a knight.
And this dragon has amazing powers.
Don't give this
I
away.
won't give it away.
So
But it
keep
does
your
have
fingers
amazing
crossed.
powers.